Thank you very much, Professor. As I contemplated coming here, the question that came into my mind is that I understand that in some European countries there is, some of the Western European countries, there's consideration being given to having Sharia law or perhaps simply Sharia courts as part of their judicial system. And I read probably about a week ago that there is some some location here in the United States that's also considering that. Can you tell me two things? One is, what is the impetus for taking that action, and what are the potential implications?
Well, first, let me just clarify your question. What's the impetus for taking that action on the part of the Muslim community or on the part of the state officials?
The state officials, I think, in this case.
I can't answer that with regard to the state officials. Let me just say this. I do believe that, quite frankly, certainly not in my lifetime, but by the time we get to the end of the 21st century, I do think that we will be in a mode of political thinking that is much more committed to a more genuine pluralism. I think the world is getting smaller, but in point of fact, what we're finding is that it's becoming more and more difficult to sort of not integrate, but to hold all of these disparate histories, disparate visions of the good, different traditions, religious and otherwise, into a singular, one-size-fits-all legal order. And so I think that the alternative to that is a more genuine pluralism, and I think that that's the spirit in which some of that is being debated. I think that, quite frankly, when you talk about Sharia being introduced in any Western country, essentially what you're talking about is family law. You're not talking about criminal law. You're not even talking about necessarily commercial law. Basically what you're talking about is family law. And so you're asking, will Muslims have the right to marry, divorce, inherit, according to Islamic law or not? That's essentially the extent of the calls for Sharia in the West. I've never heard of anything beyond that. Any serious way. Of course, you get rhetoric all over the place. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about sort of serious movements. That's the extent to which the call for Sharia takes on any significance in the West. You're talking about family law.
The follow-up question would then be, how do women's rights and protection enter into that?
Well, again, here's where we get an interesting discussion about what or how we define women's rights. And of course, the real issue is whether or not this is a voluntary or not system. I think it's a mistake, however, to assume two things. First, that all Muslim women will simply join, yes, we want Islamic law, all right? Because that will not be the case. But also to assume that all Muslim women will say, no, we don't want Islamic law. We prefer American inheritance laws over Islamic inheritance laws. Because there are Muslim women who simply say, I believe that this is what I'm obligated to do in order to live the kind of life that is pleasing to God. And I want the right and the ability to be able to do that. And to impose a non-legal, a non-Islamic system is no less oppressive than the Islamic system may be from another perspective. So again, it depends on how we define women's rights. I think, and let me just be clear here, because I don't want to be apologetic here. I think that there needs to be a serious discussion about the sort of tyranny of liberalism in all of these discussions about women's rights.
You said,
to handle this or? Oh, okay.
You said that Muslims understand the difference between Muslim and non-Muslim areas, Muslim and non-Muslim laws. I'm going to say something that's going to be a little controversial. What about the What about the Jidlin Post and the cartoon of Muhammad as a terrorist? I mean, obviously, the first reactions that they had, stomping on the Danish flag, barring people, people who said, I'm not going to sell any more Danish material, that was perfectly fine. But when it started going to murder, that's when it turned very ugly. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that a friend of mine, Zay Checker, wrote a column in which he called it the clash of decadence. Clash of uncivilization. Clash of the uncivilized, yes. I think it's ridiculous. I think that, I think that, again, there are many things that we can do legally that we should not do ethically. And I think that there are a number of things I want to say about this. Look, personally, and we're on tape here, aren't we? Personally, I was not offended by the cartoons. Which is not to say that I'm not, I'm a Muslim, and that the personality and the person of Muhammad is sacred to me. There's no question about that. But I don't think that by drawing a little guy with a turban on his head, that's Muhammad. I thought it was ridiculous. And I think that what we're really seeing here is reaction to the fact that, put it this way, what do you think would have happened if those cartoons had emerged out of Guatemala? What do you think would have happened? No, Guatemala. Why? Well, even if they noticed, they would have probably, silly Guatemalans, or something like that. But it's the fact that, as I said, the West has come into this power to define that has people reacting out of hurt because they feel helpless in the face of this voice that can define them in ways that they feel no way of sort of getting from underneath. All right? Having said that much, the reaction to me and to every single solitary, intelligent, informed Muslim jurist I've ever talked to was completely non-Islamic. And I think that, again, I mean, Christians do things all the time that we don't attribute to Christianity. I mean, why does this reaction have to be necessarily representative of Islam? Yes, there are Muslims and they're acting out certain sentiments, but that doesn't make them Islamic.
If I can just
Sure.
quick follow-up. A lot of people would say that, for example,
A lot of people would say that, for example, bombing abortion clinics, which I also strongly disagree with, is part of their Christian faith. A lot of people would also say a lot of things that are very hateful are out of their Christian faith. So it's very hard for a lot of people to see the difference between what they say is Christianity and what the majority says. And same thing with Islam.
Well, yes, but look. If we bring any issue that Christians do to the people who have the authority to define Christianity, and they say this is Christianity, then that's Christianity. But to simply say that anything that a person who's wearing a cross does is Christianity, I don't think that's fair. In the same way, anything that anybody who has a Muslim name does is Islam. I don't think that's fair, and I think we know this is not fair. And I think that, we in the West have to think about why we allow ourselves to go down those kinds of alleys. All right? Look, let me just ask you this, and I promise I'll get to your question in a second. If I were to bomb the local KKK headquarters, why would you say I did that? No. What if I quoted for you chapter and verse from the Quran? What would you say then? No, he's just using the Quran as a justification. The real reason is what? Because we know that history. We know that history. All right? But then, some Muslims do something and go get me a copy of the Quran. No, I mean, really, this is, the world is too small We have too much destructive capability. And we have, you know, the ability to communicate, both positively and negatively, in unprecedented ways. All right? We all have to be responsible, more responsible. All right? Not only for what we do, but how we validate the way that things are brought to us. I mean, we should not be taken up in these things. Yes?
Okay. Well, I have two things, if I may. The first thing is that I think if all Muslims believe what you said here today, then we wouldn't have any problems. Like there would be
no problems. It's called life.
Yeah, life. no clash of civilizations or talk of that or anything. But like there are some people who, I mean, I don't want to get into an argument whether they're Muslims or not, who would disagree with almost everything you said tonight. And I think that just...
That's all right, don't worry about it. Yeah. Go ahead. Just pull it out, dirt and all.
I think that because of those people, we can't, we can't completely dismiss Islam as something that needs to be studied by our leaders and understood and I don't know, and I mean there seems to be some consistency in things like the Muhammad cartoons and the issue with the teacher in Sudan, that people continue to justify their actions based on Islam, and just because there are a majority of Muslims who disagree with that, I don't think that means we should just disregard Islam as something completely benign,
Well, I was with you all the way up to the last point, but let me say this in all sincerity, and let me first of all congratulate you for your courage, because I think that's also part of what it's going to take. We have serious questions about Islam, and we should not be afraid to ask them. But let me just say this, and I hope you believe this: no one is more concerned about, nor more bothered by. All right? Those more stridently, how should I put it? I don't want to even call them extremists, but those more stridently violent, rejectionist voices, they're Muslims. I mean, we deal with this as an everyday reality, all right? Because this is a part of what is seeking to define us as a religious community, all right? And so, the only point I'm making here, I'll get to the other point in just a second, is that you should take the voices of those who speak out, not simply on the basis of pragmatism. I have a whole lecture here that could have gotten to the nitty-gritty stuff that would bore you all to tears. But on the basis of a serious indulgence of the most authoritative articulations of Islamic tradition, and who seek to come to terms with precisely these kinds of problems. This should be taken seriously. That's number one. Number two, if any religion in the world had to live up to the criteria that said, we will only assume that you guys are okay when nobody in your community says anything stupid. I don't know what religion would survive that. Third, there are dislocations in the Muslim world. And the Muslim world is in a state of transition. And there are developments that are going on in the Muslim world. Very positive developments. People who used to be committed to violence, for example, I have to give a lecture a few weeks from now on the group who killed Anwar Sadat. They have come 180 degrees to completely renounce violence. This has happened. We don't hear about this, but it's happened. All right. So there are developments in that regard. And then finally, I mean, look, I America as a society has taken a gigantic step in racial relations over the last 25 years. But if I wanted to, I can still find concrete justifications for saying that, I don't know, they still, do you understand what I mean by that? And I think that the same courage that I have to want to accentuate the positive in that regard, a little more indulgence may be due with regard to Islam. And I don't want to give the impression that we should not be concerned about those people who want to kill innocent civilians, who want to blow things up. We should be concerned about them, and we should condemn them, and we do. And no one is more concerned about that reality in terms of what it's doing to Islam. Both physically, who are the biggest victims of terrorism in the world today? Muslim terrorism, I mean. Muslims are the biggest victims of this. Who are the biggest victims in terms of the image, their collective image of terrorism in the world today? Muslims. So no one, we have a mutual interest here. All right? Now I want to make one last point, because you raised the issue. We have to stop this business of sort of chopping off the legs of every, I'm not talking about myself, don't worry about me, I'll be all right. But we have to stop this business of chopping off the legs of every Muslim intellectual who stands up and who wants to give a vision of Islam that's different from that stereotypical vision. We have to stop that, because America does not need a headless Muslim community. America needs a Muslim community with strong, respectable leadership. And that is the most effective means of offsetting those more unfortunate voices, either here or abroad. So in this regard, I think we need to begin to recognize our mutual interests and maybe stop some of this business of these sort of subterranean civilizational wars that we fight underneath the surface and find all kinds of excuses for doing so.
Well, who are you referring to when you mean cut off the legs of people?
What I mean is that I'm not going to say any names here, but I know Muslims who have gone out on the limb and with great courage to condemn this and to condemn that and to promote this and to propose that. All right, and they are viciously attacked as self-fundamentalists and all of these kinds of things. It's almost as if to say that, we don't want any credible Muslim leadership emerging unless it is a Muslim leadership, all right, that does exactly what I said at the opening of my talk with regard to Big Brother.
The other point is a quote from Al-Mawardi, but I think Al-Mawardi. But I'll wait. I'll ask you after, because I can't have too much time.
Well, there may be any number of quotes from Al-Mawardi with which I disagree, but get the point of my talk here. I'm not responsible for Al-Mawardi. And if you want to know about the Muslim community in America, we need to talk to the Muslim community in America. That's what we tend to, again, you want to know real Islam? Get on a plane and fly 8,000 miles. So Islam in America is not real. I'm just a phantom here, I guess. No, I'm very serious about that. And by the way, Muslims are the first ones who need to understand this.
Can I make a comment to his question?
I don't know. I just work here.
My question. I don't mean an insult to you, but I'm often bothered by questions like yours. That's not to say you cannot ask it and have an answer to it. That's legitimate in itself. But the fact that by asking the question, to me, it means to me like you have this tunnel vision. And not just by saying you, I mean the general American public, or most of the American public who ask such questions, because you don't, in the same way, ask why a country like United States, which should be called a hypocrisy, not a democracy, goes and invades Iraq, kills over 1 million people since the first Iraq invasion in 1991, most of which are civilians and children and women, innocent civilians, and that's not called. Nobody talks about that or say, oh, you know, a Christian country of the United States is killing Muslims in Iraq. Nobody labels it as a Christian crime or as being done by Christians. So everyone has a logic to distinguish, okay? Or when what's his name, McVeigh, who's a white Christian, goes and bombs a building, nobody labels them as a Christian fundamentalist or a Christian terrorist. But the minute a Muslim does something, whether it's in self-defense or whatever, the whole Islam is blamed. No, of course not, but yeah. So my question is, so
I just said
distinction has to be made.
I just said that my bombing of the KKK was in the name of Islam. Nobody believed me though, right? Why not? Okay. What is that?
My question about laws in Western countries. If you don't agree with some laws in a non-Muslim country as a Muslim, then what do you do? Supposedly these laws are founded by elected officials, and these same laws founded by elected officials have nothing to do with justice, common sense, and basically simply they're revenue-making laws.
Okay. You indulge and fully engage the process by which laws are changed.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for your talk. First, I would like to say that I'm not a scholar, so if I say something wrong, please forgive me. I would like to ask you the question regarding freedom of speech, because I think that is a very important area that forms not only the American democracy, but also the whole Western Enlightenment understanding of freedom of speech and the Muslim understanding of freedom of speech. It seems to me that there is a big gap, and how can we bridge that gap? One thing I can say is the Enlightenment idea, for example, is Voltaire's, there's a saying attributed to Voltaire, for example, that, you know, although I hate what you are saying, I will defend to death, you know. But in the case of Islam, as I understand it, in the maqasid of Sharia, there's one thing in the protection of religion. How can you, or how can anybody, you know, stand by when somebody is criticizing the Quran, Allah, Prophet, Hadith, and all that, okay? And as I understand in the case of Prophet Muhammad's biography, that there were a couple of 2-3 poets that were dispatched because of their
Dispatched.
well, with extreme, you know, prejudice. Is another word, I guess. So, given all that weight of Islamic history, how can we accommodate? Because, as far as you have repeatedly said that, you know, it's very important that we ask questions, we discuss, and especially in this kind of situation, we are in the university setting, you know, and we are not shouting fire in a theater. But it seems to me that for most Muslims, whenever there is a criticism of the religion, of the Prophet, or anything comes by, then they say, oh, this is like a shoving fire in the theater. So, you know, unless we can bridge this gap, it seems to me that there is going to be, you know, a big clashes.
I quite frankly, while the issue of competing notions and understandings of freedom of speech is certainly an important one, and one in which we could have a scholarly exchange. I don't think that most of what is happening with regard to Muslim reactions to the exercise of freedom of speech has necessarily to do with different conceptions of freedom of speech. What it has to do with is differential levels of power, by which I mean the following. And I've had conversations with Muslims that confirm this. You see, part of the problem that we have today is that Muslims feel that even the whole discourse on violence is sort of stacked against Muslims because it focuses only on physical violence that can hurt anyone, not on other forms of violence that are equally, if not more hurtful, but simply happen not to be physical. Is that making any sense to you? In other words, if a 3-year-old came here and insulted me, I mean, called me really nasty names, I'd probably just laugh at the kid. Right? And that's because the power differential between myself and that kid is such that he can't hurt me with those words. All right? If that same 3-year-old kid, however, came here with a baseball bat and cracked me across the shin, I'd feel that like anybody else felt it. All right? And what Muslims sort of are suspicious in this regard, because physical violence can hurt the West, although it does have this power of definition. But what can Muslims say? You see, like that 3-year-old, what can Muslims say, all right, that would actually have the same effect on the West as what the West said, the effect of what the West says have on them? Does everybody see that? That's part of the problem. And so you're not talking about, well, they have a different understanding of freedom of speech from this freedom of speech. No, the exercise of freedom of speech has a different impact. And that's what we're seeing the reaction to. And even if we talk about, okay, let's come up with, even if we talk about different perceptions and we arrive at a Muslim understanding, let's say, that is exactly the same as the Western understanding, those reactions will still be there because the hurt will still be there. And that has to do with a power differential in the world.
With a Muslim understanding, Muslims can come close to a Western understanding.
But my point is, I mean, that's something to be, explored in a more scholarly vein. My point is that it won't make a difference. Much of a difference. I mean, you may have freedom of speech. Look. Can President Bush, Obama, or anybody use the N-word? Well, that's the point. Why? It's freedom of speech. That's the point. Bob, every time I come to Stanford, I always hard questions. It's a great place.
So I'd like to possibly get your commentary on a different matter with respect to the perceived conflict between Muslim laws or Muslim rights, say, with Western laws or U.S. laws in particular. I've heard people gripe about the fact that, who's America to say I can't have a woman on the line? Polygamy is illegal here, but it's allowed. Or with issues of domestic, we have domestic abuse laws that prevent physical action taken against spouses, but some Muslim men would say, well, I'm allowed to do it. So where does do the laws of the nation you live in supersede the rights you may be afforded within Muslim law? Or are those even considered part of Muslim law, or are they just, where they obey allowances? So I just heard that, and this is more.
Yeah. I want to ask a sort of a follow-up that will clarify the question. Is your question primarily political, or is it legal? Is it fiqhi, mas'ala fiqhiyya, or is it what should we do, politically speaking, in this context?
I guess what I was trying to.
In other words, the point that I'm trying to make to you is this: if it's a legal, in other words, a question of Islamic law, all right? There are any number of legal interpretations that we could come up with regard to those very quote-unquote permissions that you quoted, for example. I had a conversation with the Grand Mufti of Egypt, and he told me, and he explained why, in traditional Islamic legal terms, it's forbidden, all right, to physically discipline your wife in America. Forbidden. Now, I'm not saying that, I'm not saying that's the law of Islam. Don't get me wrong. I'm not making that claim, all right? But if we're talking about, well, you see, how do we understand this law? I mean, there's a range of possibilities, all right? So that's one question. The other question would be, well, politically speaking, what do we do in America in the face of that? That's a different question. All right? So with regard to the possibilities, I mean, there are endless possibilities. Politically, again, Muslims have to get active. But before Muslims getting active really have very much effect, I think that the first priority of the Muslim community in America has to be to indigenize the discourse of Islam. To indigenize the discourse on Islam. To indigenize the discourse on Islam. Because right now, people are looking you right in the face. And they're talking to you and thinking about things that are happening 8,000 miles away. And all I can imagine in terms of the kinds of proposals that you may bring forth is what they see on television. And that is because the Muslim community has failed, and in my opinion, continues to fail to indigenize the discourse about Islam. That is, to me, one of the top priorities of the Muslim community in America.
I want to make a couple points. First of all, people should see the movie Real Bad Arabs, given that the West has always portrayed Arabs in a very bad light throughout the time there's been media. That may, have a big impact